Okay. Well, hello. Welcome to the Terrific Tips for Business podcast. I am your guest host, CJ Howard. In this segment of the podcast, I'm interviewing exceptional artists about the overlap between business and art. And today's guest is Joe Fusaro. Joe serves as the Senior Education Advisor for Art 21 and is responsible for facilitating all of Art 21's education initiatives, which are vast and broad and amazing. And that includes writing their education resources, which that's a crap ton of work. So we're going to talk about lots of fun things with that. He received his master's degree in education from the City University of New York and his bachelor's degree in fine arts from Hofstra. He is an exhibiting artist, educator, and the visual arts chair for the Nyack Public Schools in New York since 2003. We're going to talk about how he juggles all of that in addition to being an exhibiting artist and doing amazing shows all over the country. So yeah, Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to do this with you. It's nice to be here.
Absolutely. Well, your resume is always a little intimidating, I think, for most people who don't know you, because you do 500 million things and somehow find time for your own studio practice. So I guess we talked a little bit before we started recording, but like, what empowers you to be able to take that time for yourself? What motivates you?
And lots of folks make time to go to the gym on a regular basis. Lots of folks make time to meditate on a regular basis or take part in book clubs. And for me, like the studio is not really much different than other things that are priorities for you. So um I try my best, when I'm teaching during the school year to make sure I'm getting to the studio at least once a week and sometimes twice if I can if I can get there for twice a week for a couple of hours. But to just make it a part of what is scheduled during the week is important because I think lots of friends and colleagues of mine have run into trouble over the years where they say, I really want to get back to making art. I'm going to do it when I have time. You know, for the most part, whether it's educators or if you're in another field, that time doesn't present itself all that often, especially with all that's going on in the world today. So you want to carve it out and try to be consistent. And even if it's just a couple of hours a week, it's better than not getting in there and making something.
You're absolutely right. And I think, have you noticed that your studio practice has changed since you have kind of hit this COVID-19 stuff? I know your body of work has changed. Your collages are addressing that directly, which is a fascinating journey to watch. But has your actual, like, the time you're able to make to get to the studio different as well?
The time in the studio has just been quieter because I'm not inviting other people to stop by. Obviously, there's even the folks that work in the same building as I do. Um, we're on totally different schedules usually, but I'm seeing even less people. So it's a little bit more isolated in the pandemic here. I can't say that's totally a bad thing. Distractions sometimes, will hold you back, and going out for a couple of beers as opposed to spending the 2 hours in the studio is, sometimes something that might hold you back in a way. I don't know, but I do think that I miss I miss the informal, running into people downstairs at the brewery or having more people in the building when I'm working because it's a big, Garnerville's a big space where I work. And if you're the only person in the entire building, it's a lot of space and nobody around.
That's a very cavernous existence.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the body of work that you've started. Do you have kind of a synopsis for it, or are you just exploring it and it's changing as you make each new piece? This,
I mean, a lot of the work, I thought at the beginning of the pandemic that um, I mean, literally one of the first things I thought, in March of this year, when lots of us went into lockdown, is, are we going to have this crisis of touch? Um, because we're afraid to touch things and we're afraid to pick up this virus from surfaces or from other people. So it without really planning it all that much, it led to taking lots of photographs and creating different kinds of collage around um, uh, you know people coming into contact with one another or trying to avoid coming into contact with one another. And there's a series. It's sort of informal. It's not formal. I haven't printed things or exhibited this yet, but there's a series called Out of Touch that that I continue to push a little bit in the studio, and I keep trying to take photographs and digital collage. And if it catches fire and folks are interested in it, then that's when I'll make some prints of it. And maybe that could, and maybe that connects to the business part of this conversation.
that's true. Yeah.
I don't front load a lot of that. If there's a demand for something, then I'm going to follow what folks might want me to produce in terms of something, an object, for example, or a framed object. But by the same token, I don't want to have a lot of stuff in the studio that's just sort of sitting around waiting for somebody to buy it.
I think that makes you different from what a lot of the artists that come onto the show, which I think are more interested in like either creating massive amounts of inventory, or artists who maybe work in ways that are like murals or pieces that automatically are going to like not exist in the studio, right? But I think you have such an interesting conceptual bent to your work, but also like you are steeped in artists that are working now and have such a solid understanding of how you want to respond to that and how you want to infuse that into your own work, which I think makes your work a constant conversation with other artists. And I find that to be a really powerful way that your work melds and connects. And I think that you are such a connector as a human being, that that's a beautiful way that your art kind of reflects you, that it's just always reflecting and connecting the world around you. And that's beautiful that even in this touch, like you're reflecting and connecting these elements of the collage on a personal basis, on a person basis, not just concepts out there, but like the people, the bodies that are involved. And your paintings do that. Your paintings are just these massive expressions of bodies that are raw and visceral and beautiful and show our constant interconnectedness. So maybe I'm totally off base with you and your work, but
No, I mean, it's listening to you make all those connections is another reason that I think artists need to hear from people who are looking at the work but not, always involved in making the work. And, even in some of the things you just mentioned now, like it's not things that I realize myself as I'm making it, but it makes a lot of sense when I hear it expressed from another perspective. So, you know, I, I mean, I'm sure this has come up on this, in these interviews or in this show before, but in order to make good quality work, you need to have conversations with other people about the work you're making. And because it makes you realize things that you're not necessarily paying attention to yourself. I mean, I, you know, um, I wouldn't have phrased some of what you just said the way you did, but it's right on the mark in terms of what I hope folks experience, or at least, think about in some way if they're looking at it.
and I think what makes you an exceptional artist in the way that you exhibit is because you have this solid understanding of how artists need to be able to express their work, right? You understand the written artist statement part of things, which I think a lot of artists end up overlooking because they get so focused on the visual content that they miss the communication with the audience. And I think you, even though sometimes your work is incredibly abstract and not necessarily what they would assume, your artist statements always help bridge that gap between what you're trying to say and somebody who may not understand what they're looking at. And I think that takes a lot of time. Has that been something that you've actively worked on, or does that have come from teaching and, working in education? What do you think?
I just believe that folks need different kinds of pathways to understanding, works of art, whether it's stuff I'm creating or stuff that I'm teaching with or stuff that, I want to enjoy at a museum or a gallery or in a public space. And a good narrative, or at least some good quality writing about the work, just allows more people to kind of get in on what the hell this is all about. And if they like it but they don't know why they like it, then maybe a narrative or maybe some kind of writing offers an insight without being too prescriptive. I've been trying to remind myself with teachers I'm working with, as well as, just making work in the studio myself, that, I want, as often as I can, I want to provide invitations and not prescriptions. And, if I provide an invitation to seeing something in a certain way and then someone makes it their own, versus telling you what it's all about and what this memory is and who this person is and why this is the way it is in a certain collage or a drawing. I think the person who's looking at the work starts to own the work in a different way than me being too prescriptive or telling too much of the story.
I think that's actually, you hit on something I've never really considered, but I think the reason that art can be a successful business opportunity is when your focus is that, right? When your focus is on what's the person's experience with the work instead of what am I trying to say, making a focus about them. What are they getting from that? What are they going to gain from not only having this piece in their life, but maybe in their home, and really understanding their motivations.
Mhm.
And that's beautiful. Like, instead of prescribing to them what they need. And my internet may totally cut out on me, and I apologize in advance. But but instead of that, like, you're giving them an opportunity to really connect to themselves, right? I think the most powerful art connects us to ourselves, right?
Yeah, or in some way complete the work. I've never really, as far back as I can remember, at least being serious about this, I've never really tried to make stuff that tells a whole story, but instead it initiates something that begins with an experience I had, but it may relate to something that you experienced that's totally different than where it started with me. And if folks are able to make that connection and they say, wow, I would love to, I want to get to know this better, or I want to own the work, or I want to spend more time with this, then, that's successful to me. I can't ask for much more than that, because I'm offering up, often I'm offering up, and this is a bad way to put it, but this is the best way I can phrase it. I'm offering up fragments of
Okay.
things I'm offering up pieces of things that come together in a beautiful way for me. And hopefully other people see that, but in a way that they can relate to based on their own experiences.
And having you talk about your work in that way, I think your work absolutely does that. Like, I've never seen a series of your work that doesn't provide that fragment that you can connect to and complete the story yourself. Like, absolutely,
Mhm.
totally see that in all of your work. So I know that you do this a lot because you educate high schoolers, but like, what is the kind of the underpinning, the foundation of the advice that you give to these young artists who are kind of going on to the next phase and figuring out where they want to be as artists in the world? What's the the core of what you remind them to hold on to in that transition?
I mean, students in lots of the students that I work with in high school and, graduate students at NYU, they're figuring out what they're really passionate about making.
Mhm.
So, if you're passionate about making something in particular and you keep going, you keep going deeper into that and you find artists that have done that in different ways that might influence the way you think,
Mm.
you're usually on the right path. I do, I mean, we all occasionally, or maybe we've even been there ourselves, where you're making work because you think someone might like it, and that's not necessarily a place you want to be or find yourself, because you're trying to second guess folks who are going to respond. The most powerful thing you can make is something that originates in your own experience or your own perspective. And if others make a connection to that, that can be really powerful. But I've never had much, I mean, this is just me. I'm just talking about my perspective. I've never had much luck in trying to second guess what might sell or what might appeal to other people.
Mm.
And a lot of my stuff does not work well over your couch. And it's true. And I think that it's okay if it doesn't work over the couch, but if you find some other situation where it does speak to you, then even if it's not hanging in your house, I appreciate the fact that it speaks to someone in a different way.
That's beautiful. I think that's absolutely right. Like we have to make work that it could only come from us, right? Like, cause that's all we can offer to the world. If we're just trying to make work that we think somebody else wants, we're missing an opportunity to actually give to the world something that it's never had before.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Hmm.
I would love for anybody who's listening to this to get an opportunity to connect with you and to learn more about your work. What would be your favorite way for them to find out more about you? Would it be your Instagram? Would it be your website? What do you think? What would you
Um,
prefer?
I mean, it's easy to send me an email through the website.
Okay.
There's a contact link at the bottom there. I try to update the website as often as I can, but like most folks, I don't update it as often as I probably should with new stuff. So, but there, I will get the email and I will respond. And uh, yeah, I appreciate any interest or perspective that folks have that they want to share with me.
Beautiful. Well, I'll definitely put your website link and the direct link to that contact information in the description about this. And amazing. Thank you for being here. Short and
Thank,
sweet. Hopefully
thank
kind of
you.
painless.
Thank you.
All right. So, all right, there we go.